Okay, now we're going to calculate our cost per equivalent unit. In the last video, I showed you how to compute the equivalent units of production. We took the units completed and transferred in May and the work in process, and we took that percentage of completion, and those together would give us our equivalent units of production for materials and our equivalent units of production in terms of conversion. So these are the units. Now we need to think about the dollar amount. So notice we are given the dollar amounts in the problem. We have the dollar amounts. We just need to figure out how to allocate these dollar amounts. What we need to do is figure out the amounts that are in work in process, how much we need to apply to work in process, and how much of those dollar amounts we need to apply for what was transferred out. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to look at these units here, the units completed and transferred, and then the unit amounts that are in work in process. So we're going to start with the work in process for May 30th. And we're just going to pull the number. We're going to look under material. So we're going to pull that number from over here. And this is all going to be dollar amounts. So all I'm going to do is put equals and select work in process. So there's that dollar amount. And then we're going to do the same thing for conversion. So equals, and then the conversion dollar amount. So I didn't do anything. I just pulled those numbers over. So that was, I meant to put the work in process for the previous month. So this is what we started off with in work in process. And the total cost is just going to be the sum of those two numbers. That's for the prior. Okay, so if you had a T account, right here, just to show you, and this is work in process. So that's inventory, which is an asset. So your beginning balance would be the 602,458. Now, we're going to do the costs that were added during the period. So this is going to increase our inventory. So your costs added, again, we're just going to pull this from our table. Here's the materials. And then here is conversion. And then we're going to get our total materials and conversion, and that's our total costs that have been added for the period. So that would be your it would go up under your beginning balance. So again, we know our total cost here. We just don't know how to apply this total cost, so that is why we're doing this. And then now we just add the costs that we came in with to the costs that we added during the period. And we're just going to do this for each column here. Okay, so there are, let me make this bigger so we can see it. Okay, now we want to consider what we did in video 1, the equivalent units. Now, here's our equivalent units. We calculated those in the previous video, and here they are. Remember, the total units, we broke them out and up here, and now we want to consider the total units. So we're going to use those to break out the cost per equivalent unit, these totals up here. So for materials, the equivalent unit is going to be, for materials is going to be that. Don't know why it keeps. And then, okay, I think I fixed it. So the equivalent units for conversion was the 514. And now we can calculate our cost per equivalent unit. See if I can I'm having trouble with my screen right now. So remember, cost per unit means divide. So we're going to take our total materials cost and divide it by our equivalent units that we calculated in the first video. So that gives us our cost per unit for materials. And then we're going to do the same thing for conversion. We're going to take our total conversion cost, divide it by our equivalent units that we calculated in video 1, and that's going to give our conversion cost per unit. So the dollar amount divided by the unit gives us the dollar amount per unit. Okay, and in this particular problem, I think that these numbers come out perfectly to the nearest dollar, but they're not always going to be like that. So you will have to think about rounding as well. Now we can use these dollar amounts to apply out to our units that we're looking at. So now we can get the dollar amount of the units that we completed and transferred out, and that's not on our account, our books anymore, and get the dollar amount for what's still sitting in our inventory. Okay, so we're going to do ending work in process. Let me get this fixed. All right, so our ending work in process. I'm just going to put, I'll type it out so we know what we're doing here. All right, so our ending work in process in units, that's what we want to do. So we want to look at what we had up here. Our ending work in process for materials was 128. And then for conversion, it was 64. So the cost per equivalent unit was for materials was the 63.96. And then for conversion, it was the 4,005. So all of these things we calculated. So to get your total cost here, okay, there we go. So you're going to multiply your units times your cost per unit. So units times cost per unit. And then add those two together to get your total of your cost of ending work in process. Okay, and then we have our units completed and transferred out. Remember, that was our easiest calculation to do because it's just what's given to us. Because we finished all of those units. So we have 450 and 450. And then we'll take our cost per equivalent unit. I'm just going to bring that down. And we're just going to multiply to get our total cost for our units transferred out. So that will be we're going to multiply. And then get our total cost here of these two. And that will give us our total cost of units completed and transferred out. So now we have the total dollar amount of the cost of ending work in process and the total dollar amount of the units completed and transferred out. If we add those two together, we will get 5,755,458. Let me show you what that number represents. So we have allocated our total cost. If you look up here and take the numbers given to you and you add your materials and you add your conversion and then add those two numbers, you will get the amount of 5,755,458. And if we do that down here, we get the same thing. But the difference is we have allocated it correctly to what needs to go in work in process and to what needs to be in completed and transferred out. So what we did is take the total cost, use the cost per equivalent unit. We calculated the equivalent units of a production so we can get the cost per equivalent unit so we can apply out the cost correctly. So now we have the costs that are in our work in process that we still have, and we have the costs that were transferred out. And this number here will be our check figure, which will tie out to your total costs.